Josh Pierce just did $233,000 in a single month flipping vacant land, including 2 deals, one for $87,000 and another for $115,000 back to back. In this episode, he gives an absolute masterclass on the land flipping model. Towards the end, he shares a really clever way of building trust with sellers, so be sure to stick around for that. And of course, welcome to the new DealMachine podcast channel. I'm Benji, the producer of this show, and we're here to make your real estate business better, so be sure to subscribe.
So Josh Pierce, it's great to have you back on the DealMachine podcast. Little intro real quick is we help people know exactly what's going on with wholesaling and real estate investing and land flipping, what's working in today's market. And you came on a year ago after doing your first land deal and making $31,000. And it was our best episode ever. So now we're here back to check in and see what's going on. And real quick, I'm David, your co-host. I started DealMachine, and we've helped over 10,000 people close deals in all 50 states. We got Ryan over here.
And I'm Ryan Haywood. Yeah, I'm remote today, but I have done over 530 wholesale transactions. I've built up a portfolio of 56 rental properties and do some flips as well. So
yes, and then Josh, you have got a really great intro, I think, to kind of catch us up to date. You're doing most of your land flipping and investing on the East Coast, but you're here with me in Austin, Texas, where you live.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard you had a really big quarter.
Yeah. So we just came off our biggest month ever. We did close to $250,000 last month in March.
Let's go. Yeah. That's awesome. Congratulations, man. You're rolling.
Yeah.
Is it 1 year in?
No, dude, we're 2.5 years in now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we did that.
I might have got mixed up on when we posted that original episode.
I did the math on that. I think we did it 16 months ago.
Okay.
Right. So it's been almost a year and a third since then. And you know, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, right? And I think going through that, you know, and sitting down with that conversation, it probably looked like I maybe had it figured out at that time. But dude, I was just getting started. I had no clue what I was doing, was just figuring out how to build a team. And you know, now here we are, we're engineering for, you know, 200K months consistently is kind of the big goal we're shooting for now.
Got it. Okay, well, man, catch us up. What's happened since that first? Was that your first deal? I thought it was your first deal.
Yeah.
We did the episode.
Yeah, we talked about my first deal, which was, you know, we got in and out. We buy and sell land, so a lot of it's wholesale. You know, so we double close our properties. We get in a lot of them with no money down. So we flipped that property. You know, we bought for 100, sold it for 150, and made 31K profit without any money out of the pocket. So since then, we've refined that process. You know, we did close to 1.7 mil last year in just top line revenue. Most of it was that same exact model. I would say 85% of our properties were double closing with very little money down. 15% of them were actually cash closing, flipping, you know, sometimes making improvements on things like that.
Got it. So how much of your deals are land?
100% of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you buy land with like little money down? Usually they can't get like loans or something, but I guess you're wholesaling, right?
Yeah. So what we're doing in a lot of our transactions, since our last conversation, we've really dialed in our acquisitions process to the point where we are positioning ourselves as a service for these landowners where, you know, we present them with an offer where, hey, we can purchase this in cash at this price. And they're like, well, you know, that price doesn't really work for me. I really need to be up here. Okay, cool. Well, if we can come up to that price, here's what it would look like for us. We would just need to have a little more time. We would position ourselves a little bit differently. We would leverage our network to find a partner who's got a vision for the property. And if you're okay with that, getting your price on this timeline, then we can go ahead and get you your price and do it. So they're opting in to, you know, in exchange to get their price for it, they're opting in to let us essentially market their property, find a buyer, that kind of thing.
That sounds a little bit like listing it, right? Like, how is that different? How are you presenting that differently than listing it as an agent?
Because most of these people, they don't want to work with agents. They don't want to go through the uncertainty of putting their property on the market, you know, deal with tire kickers 6 to 9 months later. Maybe they're getting offers, maybe they're not. Then of course, the uncertainty in a purchase price, the uncertainty in will this thing close, will it not? What they're opting in with us. And we discussed that with them. It's like, hey, why don't you just go ahead and put this on the market and get top dollar? I don't really want to do that. I don't want to pay, you know, 10% to an agent. I would rather just take a guaranteed closing, a guaranteed purchase price, a guaranteed buyer. So they're hitting the easy button.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So even though they're asking a pretty high price, you're still guaranteeing the closing, but just on a longer timeline?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And we build in very conservative numbers in our process. So, if we think a property is going to sell at $100,000, we'll take 10% right off the top in our underwriting. So we'll move forward, assuming it's like a $90K sale, right? So we bake in these conservative numbers so that we can't lose on the backside. And very, very seldom are we actually having to cancel a contract. If we do, it's typically because of title issues, access issues, things that have come up in the process other than, damn, we just can't sell this property.
What would the price be in that example for more like a 2-week close?
So here's the thing: is when we list everything on the market through agents.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We don't self-list really any of our properties. If we get some really small properties, we might, like under 50K. Most agents won't want to touch it. But usually we've got local experts in each area that we work with, and they list our property. So when we reach out to them and say, hey, we've got this property here, what would this sell for? What do you believe market value to be? And they say, 100K. Okay, got it. Now, what do you think this property would sell for if we needed to go under contract in the next 2 weeks? And then we use that top price as an anchor. And then they say, well, you need to be at 85K and we can get this thing moved quickly. So we engineer our process for that.
Okay, so you're actually listing it with agents. How is that different to the owner than them just listing it with an agent? Like, are the tire kickers just getting filtered out by you guys, or how does that different for them?
So our process, the service we provide to our landowners is, hey, when you enter into an agreement with us, you don't have to do a thing. You don't have to lift a finger. We'll take care of everything from here. We will let you know when you need to show up for closing, how to sign. We'll send someone directly to you. You can do this closing from your kitchen table without having to leave your house. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of these people who are hanging on to this land that maybe it got passed to them and they had no interest in it in the first place. Maybe they bought it 15 years ago with plans to build and their plans changed. It's kind of become a burden, a hassle. It's kind of like the old car that's sitting in the driveway that it's like, well, yeah, I should probably sell that, but I don't want to deal with that right now. Mm-hmm. So we're coming in and we're saying, hey, we'll take care of that for you. You don't have to jump through those hoops and deal with it. Here's what that would look like. So we're offering them it's essentially a can't lose situation where, yeah, they could maybe get more if they were to go sell it themselves. But, it's kind of similar to where a pawn shop would come in for, right. Some people. It's not for everybody, but a lot of people love to be able to walk right down there and get what they need in a quick exchange.
Got it. And then what is the time frame where you're like, oh man, it didn't sell after 2 months, so we're going to buy it? Or I guess, have you ever been able to not perform with whatever their agreed price was? And then if they have an agreed price, is that just between you and them? Mm-hmm. And it's not actually in like the contract?
Right. So our agreed price is with the landowner, right? So then anything, if we sell the property outside of that, then, we may be, we target to profit, 25K on a deal. That's kind of our average that we shoot for. We'll take it right down to where we're getting no profit on a deal if that means we get to help this landowner move on from the property. We're very big on our Trustpilot online review page over the last 3 months or so. And, since popping that up and using it as a tool to build trust with landowners, we've also found it's keeping us more honest and in integrity with our process as well. So, if we've got a landowner that we've been in a relationship with for 75 days and we can't find a buyer, we have no problem taking that property down to where, we would turn it at no profit and just provide this guy a service.
Got it. Hey, Ryan, is there anything that he's mentioning that's different than how you guys approach things?
No, it's a pretty similar approach, obviously different for us because we don't do anything with land. I want to do stuff with land. I feel like I'm in a good spot to do it in the Midwest, just don't understand it. I do have questions because I know that the last time we talked, you were the guy that is very analytical on what you're doing, your numbers, your numbers. And I want to know how did you, what tendencies did you start to see with your numbers in order to scale it to where you're having a $250,000 month?
That's a fantastic question. So when we last talked, we were only doing direct mail. We were doing blind offers, and that was fantastic. We were getting incredibly high intent leads. They were receiving our letter in the mail that said, hey, I want to offer you this price for your property. And they were picking up the phone and calling us and saying, hey, I'm interested in having a conversation about this. So we were converting at the time maybe 1 in 7 of our leads into $30,000 contracts, and it was great. As we shifted to scale and building out an acquisitions team, we actually pivoted away from direct mail because we started to see our efficiency metrics go down. It started to become incredibly costly to generate a contract. Bringing in newer acquisition managers or closers, as we call them, $400 leads is not a it's an expensive way to train new closers, burning $400 leads. So we pivoted into getting into text messaging, SMS. And for the last year or so, we've basically just been doing SMS. So it's a whole different marketing channel. We're doing a lot more volume in terms of lead flow. We're getting a contract for, basically about $2,000 per contract. It's kind of where we've been even when we were doing direct mail. But we're having to talk to a lot more sellers. We're bringing a lot more people into our ecosystem just to qualify them. Of course, with SMS, these people aren't picking up the phone and reaching out to us. We're reaching out to them. They're getting 5, sometimes 10 text messages a day like this. And some of these people are just playing the game. They're just like, yeah, what do you want to offer? Like, what's your number? They've heard this before 100 times and we're just another drop in the bucket for them. So the big change for us now is we're having to sift through a lot more of that. It's more inefficient. However, from a cost standpoint, it's way cheaper to get a deal.
You can do a lot more text messaging versus postcards in generating. How many more deals do you think you do?
Man, it's been interesting. It's hard to say we're doing more deals necessarily, because it really fluctuates on the acquisition side. It's a lumpy business, right? I've got one acquisitions manager right now. So when we're doing texting with one acquisition manager, maybe we're getting maybe 2 contracts a week. 2 contracts a week is kind of the benchmark for one acquisition manager in our company.
Yeah.
It's really fluctuated. I wouldn't say we're doing more deals. We're doing better deals now. Where we've gotten better at getting bigger deals. Just last month, I talked about we did $233.8 thousand in top line revenue. I would say we profited, just under $200K after expenses. And That's awesome. With that, though, it's not like we did 8 $25,000 deals. That's kind of the average that we shoot for. But we had a $115,000 deal in there, our biggest deal to date. Right?
Wow. That's awesome.
We had a $57,000 deal in there. So with 2 deals, we basically did a $200K month.
And that's easier anyway, just because it's less work when you're managing a smaller number of transactions, larger number of assignment fees. You don't have to have a bunch of overhead. You don't have to have a bunch of employees. You don't even have to do a ton of marketing. It's just getting good quality leads and securing good quality contracts.
Yeah. And the thing I'll share about SMS versus direct mail, because I love direct mail. We were so good at it and it was easy. Like, these leads felt so good. They were so high intent. The conversations with them were just incredible. The landowners we're talking to with SMS, they're hardened. They've been, beaten and battered around by the industry. They've been burned. But the thing with that is we get bigger deals with SMS, because with direct mail, with blind offers, they're getting a letter that has a price in there. So the potential for just a bang-in deal is much smaller. That we're just, the average margin is a lot smaller because we're calling our price right there on the spot. With SMS, we're not qualifying them based on price. They're saying, yeah, what can you offer? And if our price makes sense for them, we get a chance at a much bigger margin. So I would say we do less deals with the same volume marketing with SMS, but way bigger deals. Our average profit per deal is way bigger. With direct mail, we do more deals, but our average profit per deal is a lot closer to $30K.
When we're doing wholesale on an actual property, how we run our number is, everybody knows the 70% rule. So 70% of the ARV minus your repairs, minus your assignment fee. How do you get an offer on land when there's potentially no ARV that you can pull or no repairs that are needed?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So we figure out what we call it MV, or market value, right? So, and that's not necessarily land specific. That's just specific to our company. So we figure out what market value is on a property, just based on comps nearby properties, like kind properties. Now from there, what I do, because we got sick of cutting it too close with our margins, is I take 10% right off the top. So I take market value and I multiply that by 0.9. And I take 90% of market value. And that's the price that I actually believe this property will sell at. Because if I think I've got a $100,000 property, I'm not marking it up to 110, planning to sell it at 100.
Right.
I'm actually listing it at 99.9. And after some negotiations and fielding offers, we're probably settling at 90 anyways. So, we're trading a little bit in margin for speed. So I'm building that in. So I'm taking 90% of market value forward. We call that our NLS price, or next logical sale. That's like that's the realistic sell price. Now from there, what we do is we take we round number of 10% off the top of that for agent fees. We're not typically paying 10%, maybe 6 to 8%, but we ballpark 10%, and then we ballpark $2,000 for closing costs. And then from there, that's the price that we would get if we cash the check at closing after selling this. Now from there, we back into a $25,000 profit margin. And that's how we calculate how much we can offer. So going back to that $100,000 property, we carry $90,000 forward. We take that, whatever 90% of that is, which may be $82,000, right? Take $2,000 off the top for closing costs. Now we're at $80,000, and now we subtract $25,000 desired profit margin, and we're at $55,000. So $55,000 is the most that we can offer on that property.
Technically, it's 90% rule minus your closing costs minus your assignment fee is where you get your offer.
Basically,
but you have to be pretty darn good at knowing market value. How do you familiarize yourself with market value on land?
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is something that we've learned over time. At the beginning, we were terrible at it, right? We didn't know, we just looked at the comps nearby, and we didn't know which ones were going to, give more weight to our actual property and things like that. And we overshot a lot of them, right? Like in our first year, when we sat down for that last conversation, we were taking properties in higher than we should have because we thought the property would sell for more. We were just overly ambitious, or overly optimistic about our sell prices. So that's why we started building in that 10% margin. Was like, hey, we're cutting it too close. We think we're getting $25,000 deals, and we keep getting $10,000, $15,000 deals by the time we sell them. So how can we get that back? And we just started building in those conservative measures. Even the 10% for agent fees. Even though most of our agents were paying 6 to 8%, I always like to round 10% in there because you never know what's going to happen. You never know. Maybe we need transactional lending, which is 1% at closing. Maybe we need to drop $1,000 on a survey. So it just kind of builds in a little bit more conservative numbers.
When you're looking at comping the property, determining the market value, you said sometimes you need a survey. So there's other characteristics of land that would kind of adjust its value, right? Like, does it have utilities? Does it have road access? Is there, can you walk us through some of those things that are not obvious?
Yeah. So the big ones is the property buildable or is it not buildable? If it's buildable, people can pay a lot more for the property. If it's not buildable, and what I mean by not buildable, maybe the soil isn't good, so you couldn't put an in-ground septic system in, and it's rural, so there is no public sewer in the area. So if the soil's not good to put an in-ground septic system in, that property can't be built on a lot of times. So now that property, which would be great for someone's dream home, is nothing better than recreational land, right? And now, maybe a hunter can use it, or someone will buy it to have land for their kids to run around and ride four-wheelers, but that's it. And that land trades at a lot lower price than a buildable land. So making sure the lot is buildable is the biggest thing. Does the zoning work to be able to build things like that? So as we take a property on, we're looking at, one is the acreage, what it says it is. Does it line up? And a lot of times we're getting a survey, or our buyers are getting a survey to make sure that it is the 10 acres that it says it is. The soil test, a lot of our land that we deal with is rural. We don't really do much inside of the city limits for infill lots type stuff. So most of what we're doing requires wells, requires an in-ground septic system. So that requires a little bit of due diligence work up front. So yeah, we're making sure that it has the ability to get all of that. And then of course, making sure the property has access is a big one. We've gotten so much more, I would say, picky about the deals that we take on based on access. Like what we find is sometimes properties that don't sit right on the road, they don't front the road, they maybe have either a driveway going to it and you've got to drive over someone else's property, or maybe there's rights to put a driveway in, but there's not actually one created yet because it's just been raw land. Well, in the past, we would take those properties on thinking, oh, someone will take it. But what we found was if there's a property and you've got to build an 800-foot driveway across a property, and yes, it's written in the deed that there's the rights to do that, like legally you can, but nobody's done it. Now our buyers start calculating the cost of clearing trees, putting gravel down, and they start seeing, wow, that's a $40,000 project on this $80,000 piece of land. I can't pay that $80,000 it's worth. So what we found that we were overshooting market values based on poor access and things like that.
So I think some people get stuck when somebody responds to the text message and the owner wants to sell their land and they're needing to agree on an initial price, but they can't tell if it's buildable unless they pay $1,000 for a survey. I mean, how do you guys determine if it's probably buildable at that stage, right? Because I from what I gathered, you didn't actually, do the survey until your end buyer was making an offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of times what we'll do is I've got folks on my team that'll pick up the phone and they'll call the county. And, we call the county planning and zoning department, and we can always ask, hey, I need you to take a look at this property. Could you tell me, is this property buildable? Okay, great. They'll pull it up right there and they'll
know about the soil.
No, not so much with the soil. They'll take a look at like the zoning and they'll see, we'll ask, can this lot be split into smaller lots, things like that. When it comes to soils, a few things. We use, a few different platforms where we can pull up the property and kind of see overlays of the soil, and it's not 100% accurate, but it's enough for us to make an educated decision on the property based on, the soil type that we can see our property has, and then we look in the nearby area and see with that soil type, are there structures built on that soil type nearby.
Yeah.
Right. We can make more calculated decisions like that. We can even call, we've got relationships with some of our soil scientists where we'll call and say, hey, can you do, I call it a desktop analysis. Can you just pull up and see, is this likely to pass a perk test if we were to get the soil done? And we can get, some of those, sometimes they'll give us a preliminary heads up of like, yeah, you should be good with this, but of course we'd recommend it. In some markets, we do some work in the Northeast, and maybe soil's a lot more challenging to get buildable soil types up there in some of the areas that we're working in. And what we find is in some markets we're in, we schedule a perk test right away. We take care of it ourselves because what we find is our buyers always get hung up on, oh, if this is past a perk, I would take it. But because we don't know, I don't want to take on that risk myself. So in some markets, we're operating differently with what we do before we list the property to reduce buyer resistance and make it easier for buyers to put in offers.
What is the perk test?
The perk test is a water percolation test where we're essentially the soil scientist comes out and they're testing the soil to make sure that it drains at the level that it needs to for an in-ground septic system to go in the ground.
Ryan, what other questions would you need to feel comfortable marketing to landowners?
I don't know that I'd need any more to market to landowners. I think the scary part for me, I think I can handle doing marketing, but then getting one under contract and like finding out how to sell it. To me, marketing is an easier task. Maybe I don't say easy because I've never tried it, but like finding buyers on properties is probably a whole lot different than finding buyers for land. So give us a couple secrets on how you find a buyer. And I know you said you work with realtors as well. So maybe that's the secret sauce.
Yeah. So I would say this is, some of the secret sauce to the success that we have. And, I learned very early on that the way my company is structured, this is an acquisitions business, right? And if I can focus 80 to 90% of my efforts and my company's efforts on acquisitions, that we can get these properties moved and get them sold. And how we do that is through local realtors. We build deep relationships with A-player realtors in each of the markets that we're in. And what that does is it allows us to get around having to build an entire back half of this business, which is, the selling side. I don't have to worry about listing and selling all of that. I have one Dispo manager. She's absolutely incredible. She handles all of our inventory from signed contract. As soon as my closer gets a signed contract, we pass it off to my Dispo manager, and she takes care of getting it off to title, finding and coordinating with an agent, getting it listed, managing that agent and making sure that we're, getting the activity we need while nurturing and keeping the seller engaged all the way through the closing process. So instead of having multiple people dealing with, self-listing sites and Facebook Marketplace and dealing with tire kickers and all of that, asking us questions that we maybe don't even know the answers to because we're not local in that market. Instead, we defer to local experts. We pay a good chunk of our profit to those agents, but it allows us to always have local experts selling our properties. A lot of times they have pocket buyers where they're like, oh, I know people that are looking for a 10-acre lot. Let me get this out to my network. And ultimately, they're going to be able to answer a lot of the questions that these buyers are asking because they're familiar with the area in a way that we're not.
And their compensation doesn't really affect your assignment fee, or does part of what they get paid come out of your assignment fee?
Oh, it heavily affects our assignment fee. So let's say, the average agent is going to take 6% in commissions, right? They're going to take 3% and then they're going to give the buyer's agent 3%. And, let's say on a $100,000 sale where we would make $25,000, that agent is making 6% of $100,000. So the first $6K is going to the agent commissions, right? Well, that's going to affect our margin because we would have made $31K, but now we're making $25K on this deal. So a lot of times we're giving away 20, sometimes 25% of the deal profits to the agent that's selling the deal. It's just a business decision that we made early on that just, it made sense to not have to build out the back 50% of the company and have an entire, sales team dealing with that. We're fine paying that. And we understand that, we're going to make, maybe 20% less than we could make, but we have peace of mind knowing that we've got good agents in every market we work.
Is there any consideration? Because to me, it would be way too tempting to be like, you know what, I'm going to find out who's buying these things and just save that little bit of money, hire a person to do Dispo and build a buyer's list. Is that a temptation, or are you pretty good to stay away? Yeah,
no, it's tempting. And, there was a while, actually at one point last year, I was like, you know what, let's do that. Let's start building a buyer's list. Let's throw our properties up on the market on, Broker List is like a self-listing site. And I was like, let's funnel the buyer calls to me and I'll field them. And I started getting buyer calls, and the questions they were asking, I was like, man, I don't know if I have the capacity to be taking these conversations right now and to be doing this research and all of that. And in 1 week, I quickly realized the value that those agents were actually providing. Being able to answer, like, can I put a mobile home on this property? Can I put a shop on this property that doesn't have utilities? And I'm like, there's a lot of extra calls to the county I've got to make to find this stuff out when there are folks that's their job. They know that like the back of their hand. So it is tempting. It's very tempting.
Like it's a good thing. At first, the thought is like, oh, I'll save this much money. But the very moment, and honestly, as soon as you said that, the calls, I was like, oh, shoot, yeah, I'm out as well. I wouldn't. Yeah. The minute that my phone starts ringing and I'm having to answer extra calls and questions, I'd be going back to the realtor right away.
And they're asking like these off the wall hypotheticals, like if my neighbor's sons whatever put this structure on the property and it was only used for this, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that, but now this is a lead and it's my potential sale, so I have to I've got to be the one that finds this out. And that was interesting. So that same concept though is it's tempting to add more people to my team and oh yeah, we can do that in-house and we can save more money. And I've gone down that path since we last met. I, at one point, had a team of 15 people because I was like, well, it's just one more person. We can, for $1,200 a month, we can plug someone else in and they can own that themselves. And we can be operating this much more efficiently. And if we just close one more deal, it pays for itself for 2 years, right? Like I was justifying it. And next thing you know, I have a team of 15 and that's a heavy burden to carry. right? It's so much more operational overhead and everything, where I've realized I don't want to have a big team. I want to do more with a smaller team. I've got 9 people on my team right now, and it feels the best it has in over a year.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of smaller team.
Yeah.
Smaller operation.
I learned it the hard way. And I remember, I came into this space and, I'd walk into some of these investor, weekends and stuff like that. And I kind of established a reputation of like the young gun who was like gas pedal, like right out of the gate, gas pedal, build the team. And, some of these older guys or these guys that have been around for longer, they'd be like, I did the whole 12-person team and it's not for me. And I would just kind of like scoff it off and be like, all right, yeah, well, we'll see. And yeah, about a year and a half in, I started to hit some burnout and realize I see what they're saying, but I had to find it out for myself. But yeah, the smaller team feels way better.
Where can Ryan find a great agent to list one of his properties, by the way?
Oh my
there
gosh.
we go.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So we do a few things when it comes to finding great agents. One, the first place I like to look is investor communities. And I've found that investors in the land space have been incredibly generous about sharing their resources. I'm in a Discord community, for example, where there's a massive shared resources channel where people are always asking, does anybody have an agent who will double close a property in this county in Ohio? And 2-3 people will jump in and say, hey, reach out to this guy, tell this guy I sent you. And so if I can go to someone who has been directly referred by someone who I respect in the space, that's a fantastic way. I always love to take a referral because they already understand our business model. I don't have to teach them what we're doing. They're already familiar with working with investors. So that's the first place I look. The second place I look, we've got a process now where we're looking at Zillow listings and we're looking at sold listings and seeing, okay, who has a history of selling land in this area inside of, this type of property, this size property, that kind of thing. And we'll do some cold outreach and we'll reach out to 4 or 5 agents and just open up a conversation. And it's kind of like lead gen. And we're kind of qualifying them, feeling into who would we feel comfortable representing us here. And over time, we've developed a process where we have a pretty high standard with the agents we're working with, where, we want A players only. And, we give our agents a grade. And our A player agents, like, they're safe. We want to go deeper in their areas. We're asking those agents, what other counties do you like? Where would you recommend we go? We've got B player agents that we're comfortable with. They're great. We'd give them more deals, but also we're continuing to look for A players in those markets. So we may test out some other agents, send our next deal to someone new and kind of roll the dice a little bit. But we're always testing and experimenting with new agents, because what we found is we may have an agent that does great for us on one property. So we send them 4 or 5 properties over the next 30 to 60 days. And all of a sudden they regress to the mean, and we're finding, wow, that agent isn't the knockout agent we thought they were. They're just throwing this property up on the MLS and hoping for some response. Well, we could have done that ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot. Like, just in general, when you get a realtor involved, that it's like their process is sometimes just throw it out there and wait for the calls to come in. Do you have like characteristics of the people that you work with? Like, if you notice that kind of activity, do you stop working with them, or do you try to find the people that are more proactive in trying to find a buyer versus just throwing it out there and waiting?
Yeah, that's something we're always working on getting better at. We look for land agents specifically, right? Like, every agent will take our property, right? The average,
Right.
everyday Keller Williams agent, maybe she sold a couple land parcels last year, but she's not a land specific agent. I don't want to put my properties in their hands, not because they can't do the job, but they're not going to be the best person for the job. So we look for land specific agents. There's a few different brokerages that are great for that. I think of like Whitetail Properties, Mossy Oak Properties. They're focused around land. Mm-hmm. So we like land specific agents. There are a few kind of flags that we look for. If they fly their own drone, if they're like, oh, I've got my own drone, I'll take photos myself. They may not sound like much, but the fact that they have their own drone that means they're in the land space. Like land is their thing. Land is their game, right?
Yep.
I think of like these Southerners, the good old boys, the hunting guys. Like they're like, land is my thing. Like I've got the 4-wheeler. I take buyers out there on it. I'll drive the properties myself, that kind of thing. So we look for that. We look for are they local to the area? Any agent will say, I'll take your property. I've got access to the whole MLS. I can list it. Okay, you can list it, but how far are you from the property? Oh, you're 2 hours from the property. So would you show the property to buyers, or what would that go? Some agents are like, no, I wouldn't show it to buyers. If they've got an agent, they'll walk it, but I wouldn't. Some agents are like, oh yeah, I'll try to be out there for every single walking of the property. Right. So I want to work with those agents. I want to work with the agents who are, maybe less than a county away. They'll drive over, they'll meet buyers out there. They'll go down to the county and take care of something if something's needed, things like that. Other things we look for, communication, right? If we're trying to build a relationship with an agent and they haven't listed a property yet, and we're finding shoddy communication, they're slow to respond, they don't feel engaged, well, we're not even working with them yet. And that's the type of interaction we're getting. If we have 4 properties on the market with them, we have to imagine it's going to be similar. So those are some of the big things we look for there.
We did a few land things in DealMachine over the last year. I was curious if these are things that you would find helpful as well. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you haven't. Usually, older people are the ones who are more likely to sell their land. If it's a younger person that owns vacant land, they're not typically going to be selling it. They've bought it for a reason and they're waiting for that reason still. Right?
Exactly. We found the same. I mean, the truth is, can you get deals, from folks in their 30s, their 40s? Absolutely. There's, people get properties passed down to them that they want nothing to do with all the time. But the likelihood of them selling is far less than what I would classify as 55 and up. Mm-hmm. Most of the sellers we talk to are, they're in their 60s. I can't even count on 2 hands anymore how many properties how many owners in the last couple of weeks I've talked to that are, I'm 78 years old. We're looking to take care of this land. It's a lot easier to split up money amongst my kids than it is to split land when I pass away. Things like that.
So there's an age filter of the owner, basically,
Mm-hmm.
as what people end up using is over 65, or I don't know, is there an age that you would say is like a good range to be filtering your list to say, hey, market to a list of over 70 years old or something like that?
Yeah. If I was on like running a DealMachine filter, I would filter for 55 and up.
55.
And I would, especially if I was running direct mail, like before when we were running direct mail, we were sending it to everybody. If I were to go back to direct mail today, I would absolutely run those filters and I would only send mail to people 55 and up. And yes, I understand I would be missing out on opportunity for less, but I would be putting a greater percentage of my, my marketing allocation into people that are more likely to sell.
Now, so for texting, I mean, you could build a list as well. Would you also do the age filter for texting, or are you just sending it to everyone because texting is a much lower cost per marketing that you're doing?
Yeah, I go back and forth with that. Right now, we send it to everyone. And the reason for that is because we text at such high volume. We send 10,000 texts per day. And 10,000 texts per day at the level that we're filtering, we've basically got to start with, I think we get 15% of our top of funnel records actually get texted by the time we remove people that are on the do not contact and all of that. So, let's say, how many, we basically need, let's ballpark at 100,000 top of funnel records per day to send 10,000. I can't be too picky in that, because we're going to burn through so much data. We're going to burn through so many markets. So we've decided with texting, let's open up the funnel and let's just get ourselves in front of more people, more opportunity.
Got it.
But yeah, if I was doing it on a tighter budget, if I was, just starting today, I would absolutely run those filters as well.
The other thing is people requested the Do Land to have a landlocked filter. So we made sure to put that in there as well. So you can filter out land that has no street access, no direct street access.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Before we were using we were telling people, hey, use the sewer, right? But there are rural pieces of land that don't have access to a sewer, but are on a street. So we kind of created that additional data set, and that was a new thing. And then for texting, so a lot of people exporting the phone numbers, texting more so than calling. is problematic if you call a number that is no longer in service. And so we have this column called how much was this phone used in the last 2 months. So it's like no activity, low, medium, or high. And it's not based on their interaction with DealMachine customers, but it's just overall, how much are they using their phone in the last 2 months? And so that filter has proven to be really helpful as well, so that people can remove any type of phone numbers that just have no activity or low activity in the last 2 months. And if they're medium or higher, I mean, it's definitely not disconnected because that data is actually accurate on that perspective. So those are the 3 things that kind of come to mind that are relevant to your business model. So I guess as somebody who does a lot of text, like, is that true? Would you say in terms of like, hey, you want to get rid of any of those disconnected numbers?
100%. I mean, the very first thing we're doing when we export a list is we use Google Sheets and have the macros or the app script set up, and it's essentially an automation that will go through our skip trace list. And for each landowner, we get, 6 or 7 potential phone numbers, right? Maybe less depending on how many each have. But in there are landline phones, there are phones that are outdated, whatever. So we have our automation filter out any landlines and remove them from the list, right? And that removes a big chunk of our list of landowners, because a lot of these landowners don't have cell phones that we can text. So what we're left with is a list of maybe 2 to 3 possible mobile phone numbers for each person. And then what we do is we go through that list and we text them. And of course, a lot of these people are saying, yep, nope, you've got the wrong number. That's not me. People keep texting me asking if I'm John. No, that they're taking their frustration out on us because they keep showing up on those lists. So absolutely, that's an important filter.
Can you share the software you're using to send the texts?
Yeah, so we use a platform called Smarter Contact.
Yeah, familiar with it.
Yep. So we use Smarter Contact. We absolutely love them. I highly recommend them. They're great. They allow us to send text at scale. It makes it really easy for me to have multiple people on my team in there working out of what's called sub accounts. So, essentially one texter we think can do about 5,000 texts a day. And, because most of those people aren't responding, they get into a bunch of quality conversations. But if we go beyond 5,000, we want 2 texters, and to be able to use sub accounts where each person can kind of be in their own account. That allows us to work really well out of that.
Talk to me about how you're using cookies in order to do more land deals.
Yeah, this is a fun one. So about 1.5 years ago, I started a business venture called Cookie Closers to help build trust with landowners. What we found was the biggest objection we were getting consistently was that landowners just don't trust us. They don't know us enough. And in an industry where these landowners have been, kind of jaded, they've been lowballed, they've been kind of pushed around, they come in frustrated, they come in with a guard up. And if we can position ourselves as people who are trustworthy, people who are credible, people who, are people of integrity, where, we make ourselves easier to be chosen is ultimately the goal that we have in our company. How can we make ourselves easier to be chosen by landowners, right? Not how can we force them to do a deal with us? How can we position ourselves to where looking at 3 options, we're the easy choice, right? So we engineer so much of our process around that. Well, what we found over time was if we can engineer little moments inside of our process to build that trust and make it easier to be chosen, now where, it reduces that buyer or that seller hesitation. So we started sending cookies to our landowners to build relationships with them. It started out as a thank you after entering into an agreement with sellers. Hey, thanks a lot for trusting us. You're in good hands with us. We're excited to show you how simple this can be. And that was getting such a great response that we started testing it out in our acquisitions process as well, and started sending it to our highest intent leads. I would call it like our leads in the red zone, our leads that were, had likelihood of scoring. And what we found was the cookies would build the trust. And then when they were ready to sell, they would call us because we made the impression on them that they couldn't get out of their mind. All of a sudden, they're looking at us in a different league than all the other people they're talking to. So we started doing that. We actually started the business venture and ran it for about 1 year. We're not running Cookie Closers anymore. It wasn't an incredibly profitable business. It was more of it made my land business incredibly profitable, but we were selling $50 cookie boxes. And of course, you've got to sell a lot of those to make any money though. So $50 cookie boxes, $50,000 land deals. I decided to allocate the energy into the land business, but we still send gifts, strategic gifts to build relationships. I Uber Eats a pizza to a landowner who I was having a hard time reaching. He was under contract with us and we had a closing coming up and we weren't able to reach him. And I couldn't get in touch with him via phone. I Uber Eats a pizza to his doorstep. And on the note in Uber Eats, on the receipt, I was able to write a note of like, hey, been trying to reach you, give me a call. Well, turns out he was out of the country and didn't have his phone in service. And he called me when he got back and he absolutely loved it. He was like, man, I saw it on my Ring cam. Actually, my dog enjoyed the pizza because it was sitting on the deck. I didn't get a chance to enjoy it. That was awesome. And dude, I was sorry. I was just out of the country and I should have let you know. So yeah, we use That's gifts awesome. And stuff like that. The cookies is a great one because it was intended to be like, share this with your family, break this cookie in half. And now we win their wife over as well. And again, we make ourselves easier to be chosen.
I feel like especially since a lot of sellers of vacant land are older, I think a lot of things I would expect to hear is like, young people like you, they don't have manners like this these days. Like, this was so awesome. And I'm just going off of a recent experience where, my girlfriend actually was trying to lease a place and she gave this guy ice cream because he said he loved like peach ice cream. And that was exactly what he said. I was like, this makes a lot of sense. It went a long way with him.
Yeah. Yeah, we do, like when we send, cookies with a handwritten card or whatever it is we send, we always try to tie it back to the conversation we had with them. So if I'm sending let's say I'm sending a box of cookies with a card to a landowner that I just built a relationship with, and I think that there's some potential for us to work together, I may mention in the note like, hey, it's been wonderful getting to know you and understanding what this land means to you. I can see it's been in the family for a long time, and how you choose to move on from this it's an important decision for you, and I just want you to know, one, I respect that. Two, like we're here as a resource for you. Should anything, should you, need anything, whatever. And at the end of the day, should you choose to work with us, we're excited to show you how simple this can actually be. And that gesture where we saw them as an individual, where we mentioned, how much this land means to them, or, as a father, like we tied in that one thing. They reach out and they're like, wow, that was the coolest thing. Nobody, I talk to people like you guys all the time. Nobody's ever done that. I'm not ready to sell today, but when I am, you'll be the first person I call. And if we can plant enough seeds like that, we start getting calls 6 months later and they remember us.
This has been such a masterclass.
I love it.
Ryan, what other questions do you have?
I don't know that I have another question like keyed up. I feel like this was a masterclass. It was more than a podcast. It was great because I feel like I still don't have the I'm going to go and do land, but I'm close. And I feel like anybody that's listening that might be on that edge got a lot from this because you were so vulnerable in sharing details and seeing, just knowing how your business has developed in the last 16 months is really cool. And honestly, a lot of the things that you've said, even as far as having a team and having too big of a team and scaling it back, those are all things that every one of us that's doing wholesaling goes through. And I hope that instead of making the same mistakes that we all make in scaling too big, I hope that people can take that and just run with it and settle into what works like you have and keep a good thing going. And it's really cool.
You mentioned something, people that are, maybe interested in doing land and maybe they've gotten, something out of this. And, a lot of people ask me, like, why land? Why'd you choose land? And, I may have shared this in our last conversation. I just wanted to kind of hit on that real quick. So when I was ready to get into real estate, I hit up a good friend of mine who had been wholesaling houses for now about 10 years. And I said, all right, man, I'm ready to go. Where do I start? And he said, dude, if I were to start over right now, I would look at land. And I asked him why. And he said, well, I got in with the wholesale stuff ahead of the curve. And it was a great time 10 years ago to do that. But it might not be the same way today. But if you look at land, you can still get in on the front end of that wave, essentially is how he explained it to me. Not to mention, these landowners they're way less attached to their land because it's oftentimes, it's like the back 40 they forgot about. It's the thing that's sitting on the shelf collecting dust. They're not using it. There's no attachment to it. They're not living in it. So that's great. There's a lot less attachment to it. I've found it's generally an easier, yes, from what I imagine someone living in their house and having to move out so that we can roll the dice on possibly selling their property. So there's that. Now, I just chatted with him the other day about our success in the month of March. And he said, dude, I've been doing houses for 10 years and I've never had a 6-figure deal. Very rarely have I had a $60,000 deal, right? And we just had, both of those in the same month. So, I don't know enough about the house space, but the potential for margin seems to be greater with deals here. So, I love it. I'm glad that I chose this path for sure.
How big was that piece of land that you did 6 figures on, acreage wise?
It was 13 acres.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. And real quick, if I've got a minute to share on that, I'm not going to share the market because it's a fantastic market for us, but we got a 12-acre lot, and it was a mail lead. We got a 12-acre lot. We bought it for $125 and we sold it for $240, and we made $87,000 on the property. And we closed this property way before we estimated we would, so we underpromised and overdelivered for the landowner. And he said, Josh, this was such a wonderful experience. I would like to connect you with my sister who owns the neighboring property.
Wow.
And the beautiful thing about this was when we put that first property on the market, we had 2 full price offers the first day we put it on the market. And that like rarely happens. 2 full price offers. One offer was for $250K and one offer was for $300K, but they needed 90 days to close. So we chose the $250K offer that would close the same month. So we told the $300K offer, hey, we're not going to take it. It's going to take you too long to close. Well, what ended up happening was the property failed a perk test. And it was going to need what's called an engineered septic system, which costs an extra $10,000, maybe $15,000. So we lost our buyer, or actually our buyer talked us down to $240, and we ended up closing that deal. So when this owner said, I want to connect you with my sister, she wants the same deal, same terms, same price. We went back to that $300,000 buyer and said, hey, we've got the neighboring property if you're still interested, and went back to them. And they were like, absolutely. So we had both of those contracts in place like the next day. Ultimately, we lost that buyer, but we were able to sell this thing. I think we ended up selling it for $275 or something like that, and made $115 on it. So $87K direct referral to his sister got us the $115K deal.
And it was still sellable even though it failed the perk test?
Yes, because our buyer, the plan that our buyer had for the property, they were going to be able to do the build they wanted to with more of a comprehensive style septic system.
Okay.
Something that may scare a lot of, maybe your average family buyer off, but the buyer that we had was like, nope, that's not a problem for me because I can do X, Y, and Z what I need to.
Josh, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. And can you let people know where they can find you? Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I was just curious, let people know where they can find you.
Absolutely. So Instagram, probably the easiest place to reach out to me. It's Josh Pierce, PIERCE.REI. And then email as well, josh@highergroundland.com, HIGHERGROUND, land, LAND. And then, I'm an open book when it comes to questions about this stuff. I love pulling back the curtain and sharing what's working. I remember when I first got started with land, I was the guy that was, kind of being annoying, asking all these people that have been around for a while, for tips and tricks. And I remember, like making the vow to myself that when I got to a position where I could help others, I would without hesitation. So I appreciate it when people reach out. I do have keep a couple spots open for, direct one-on-one mentorship, that kind of thing. If anybody's interested, I can, be open to having a conversation about that. But yeah, I'm an open book.
Thank you so much. Let's end there. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.